So in terms of bigger questions, one question that we haven't touched on that much is furloughing staff. So I know you mentioned it, Fiona, and there's been a question of, have any of you, I guess Petrina, Angela and Katie, have any of you furloughed staff?
We haven't furloughed any of our staff, and actually I've got to say Hackney Council have been brilliant. So even our agency staff have been on full pay all the way through the lockdown, and kept on contract, whether they were doing any work or not, which I think is just to highlight that actually Hackney and the councillors are really supporting us as a team.
Yeah. Petrina, any furloughing?
Yeah, we furloughed 2 of our contracted play workers, but not our senior worker. So we were able to operate because we've got a pool of sessional workers, so we'll still be able to continue.
Okay. And Katie?
We actually did furlough some of our sessional workers. So even though they didn't have contracts, it was still felt that they in normal times would work for us very regularly, and obviously we couldn't offer that same number of shifts as they would normally be getting, and we wanted to be fair to them and keep them as well. So yeah, I think we furloughed 14 or 15 sessional workers, and then we've topped up other workers who have not been able to work their normal number of hours.
Okay, brilliant. So another question that's come up is there any more information or any document on how COVID reacts on surfaces? I know, Angela, you did say you've been doing quite a lot of research.
So there's 2 that I found that are really useful, and all you have to do is just put in COVID-19 surfaces. So the first 2 that come up, one of them's by the BBC that lists off everything down from metal to plastic and cardboard, lists it all off. And then the second one, which I was just trying to look, it's called Business something, and that lists off everything. But they're in the first 2 if you just Google COVID-19 on surfaces.
Okay, brilliant. So there's been some mention of Play Ranger services. Petrina, I think you talked about that. So the question is around how are you managing that, bearing in mind that nobody's meant to meet more than 6 people. So how do you limit a Play Ranger service to that?
So the kind of thought process was that we were hoping by the summer, the number of gatherings might change. Yeah, we don't really know how it's going to work. The thought process is to just put out some activities or our activities that you will throw away at the end of the session, and just do some non-contact group games, but just to let the community know that, there's an offer there in park or open space.
Angela, do you want to say anything about that? Because you said you were thinking that might be a way that you can have contact with children that weren't included in the booked in sessions.
Yeah, so our area's just got a support by Sport England. So one of the things that is on the books is that we might be then that we're looking to do play ranging as well. So leaving the playground, going on to the estates, and almost that sort of pop-up play environment of us going into spaces and then coming back to the playground as a surface as well. But our primary thing is first to get the playground open and then to try and move on to doing other options as well.
Okay, brilliant. So in terms of, I did touch earlier on asking you about how you're going to manage staff not having contact with too many bubbles. If you have got staff seeing more than one group of children, how are you going to manage any self-isolation that comes out of that if somebody gets COVID? Does the whole lot shut down, or what are you thinking?
We've had to do a few kind of scenario-based sort of risk assessments. So what we would do if someone had symptoms, what we would do if someone was in contact with someone that had symptoms, and kind of we have thought that although we may have some general sort of protocols to follow, we will also need to really think about anything on the individual level. So for instance, if someone has a one-to-one worker and they're in very close contact with that one-to-one worker, what that then scenario would look like. So kind of having the overall protocols in place, but then adapting them for individuals when we know we've got, or if we have cases.
Okay. Katrina, how are you thinking about the possibilities of self-isolating and who goes? How many people go?
So I mean, what we've done is it's totally up to the individual. I mean, we did do a self-risk assessment of staff to get them to identify, like Angela was saying, if you have certain symptoms that you know to yourself you shouldn't be on site, and it was, you know, doing that on a daily basis. But I don't know, because we haven't done the bubble scenario yet. I can't really say until we get into it. But what we did was we had the same children, so it didn't change.
Right. Okay. All right.
We're also we're making sure our managers aren't working directly with young people, like in a hands-on way, because we understand that actually if our team of managers go down, the whole playground has to shut. So we're trying to kind of keep that element of working closely with young people away from some of our vital managers.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting, because there was some conversation about floaters and people doing first aid. So you're talking about having some people in all of your teams who don't have direct contact and therefore would hopefully not be included in the COVID.
Yeah, we do understand that it's really hard to say that we wouldn't have any direct contact, but that would be the aim. Yeah.
Okay, good. So another question is, are you going to be restricting what things children bring in? So I think this is a bit like the services question, isn't it? If they're bringing in food or packed lunches or phones or toys, I don't know. Have you thought about whether you need to restrict any of that?
We're not restricting it, but obviously we would get down to that staff wouldn't be holding anything that a young person's brought into a playground. So if a young person brings a packed lunchbox, we've got areas set up that are almost marked like a table with squares on it. They can place their thing, that's their square where their items go, so they know where to retrieve it from. And any valuables, COVID-19 or not, we've always said don't bring them to the playground. It's their own responsibility.
Yeah, ours is the same.
Okay. And are you issuing any advice to staff around things like changing their clothes straight away when they get home, and additional things that you've thought in terms of your business being COVID safe, if you like?
So we've got staff have got their own uniforms, so they can have access to multiple t-shirts and uniforms on top of what they've already got. We've just bought supplies of that, and I know this sounds a bit militant, but we've bought rubber flexi tubs for everybody, so everybody's got their own flexi tub. They put their own stuff in it, and their responsibility, they now know no one's touched their personal items, that's theirs, and if they want to, they've cleaned it down, so they know that it's clean. So we've kind of got into that sort of, not lockers that we're all scrambling around the same locker trying to get stuff in and inside it. So again, I mean, this is just in pre-planning. It might not work once we get into the playground, but that's my thought.
Also, Boris may this afternoon tell us a whole different range of rules.
I've spent loads of money on stand 2 meters apart signs and stuff like that. You just go, for what?
Just cross it off and write 1.
Yeah.
So another question has been about the food distribution, because I think that came through from what Fiona was saying. A lot of organisations have been able to do some of that through the lockdown, but some organisations I think may have just received funding to be able to start doing that, or want to start doing some of that as we go through the summer. So have you got any tips for those of you that have done it around how you might set up a service like that, giving out food?
So we received, well, we had a food bank. We had 2 food banks prior to COVID. One was just children and young people's one, directly delivered by them for them. And one was our usual Wednesday adult food bank. But since the lockdown, the council have assisted us a little bit with taking safety precautions and training and all of that stuff that is COVID related. So, I mean, for those organisations who are thinking of doing it, because it's really good, it's rewarding. The community get a lot from it. One of the things we did was we moved our food bank outside, so there is no coming into the building anymore. And staff who operate the food banks do have PPE equipment. The community are not allowed to touch the food, so we'll have a staff member who will sort of assist them at a distance with a crate and who will pick the stuff for them. So they're not in close contact with the food, but it's worked really well. But yeah, if you get in contact with your local authority, because they've got training, which is to help with food banks and food distribution.
Okay. So what about children who are shielding or are in shielding households? Are you thinking about any specific advice for those families in terms of whether they should or shouldn't come to the sessions?
And that's another thing in terms of guidelines and what you can and can't do, which has been a bit frustrating. But at the moment, we are working with public health and the borough to help to identify those children who are local to us. So we can give them some packs or just give them a bit of advice, or set up some sort of Zoom type meetings with them, just to let them know that we are here and we're here to support.
Yeah. Okay, I think there has been a massive amount of online service that's been created during this time, which is accessible to many children, not all, of course. Mm. There is a specific question about hard to reach children and whether you have any ideas, because it's such a range, isn't it, where we're just trying to actually deliver something, but then we all also spend a lot of time thinking about those children that really need play as a sort of mitigation to the situation they find themselves in, whether that's their mental health or the experience they've found through lockdown, or whether it's as simple as being able to contact them if they don't have access to online, or they might be from Roma communities that are moving around. Have you got any, have you been able to think that far forward, with no judgment if you haven't, because basically working out whether wood is safe has been a pretty big question for them. Yeah. I know we'll all be working hard going forward, but have you given those, what are your thoughts around those?
So definitely for our site, and there is a whole heap of children who we suddenly realised that telephone numbers that we've got for them are 5 years out of date and stuff like that, and we've sort of lost track of them a little bit, but you know, through word of mouth, sort of know they're still in the area. I mean, I've got down going to my senior management team that I just want to go with a megaphone outside their property just to shout, "We're here! Show me your face in the mirror, in the window," and stuff. So we've got a little bit of that we might just do a bit of a tracking of going, we're going to go and stand outside some properties and just shout to see if we get a response. And then that will be our kind of starting point of trying to see where we've lost some of the children.
Right, okay. Right, well, we're going to finish up, and somebody's just put in the chat that for our information, the government are making an announcement in the next few minutes, so I don't want to hold you away from that. But I guess thank you all so much. Thanks to the speakers, that's been brilliant. Thanks to all those lovely smiling faces of people who've been listening, watching. Feel free to contact us with questions for the speakers or anything else. Just keep telling us what's going on, and also London Play are always really interested in what's going on in London around the playgrounds. I think there's been really inspiring stuff about partnerships, new partnerships being created, partnerships being built on with teachers, with social services. That's been brilliant to hear about. I think it's interesting for us all to think about the additional ways that we might come across issues in terms of safeguarding. I think working in small groups is not something necessarily we've all been doing, and it does bring up different issues, and it's really important to think about that and make sure that you are really connected to all of your different support systems in your boroughs. I've been very interested to think about how local authorities are relating to government. So we've got the government guidance, basically the only thing we've got so far is education and childcare guidance, as far as we can find out in terms of looking at things. Maybe a little bit about in parks, playgrounds, if we're worrying about surfaces. But yeah, we're under education and childcare. Some of us may feel more comfortable than others. I think we're all a bit worried about losing the play ethos story within all of this as we try and practically respond to what we're doing. But we also think about, you know, our core ideas around free play and the sense of agency, self-confidence, independence and resilience that we've been trying to create within an extremely restricted practice framework. I think that is quite difficult and a big challenge. thanks so much for all the practical stuff about cleaning, rotating equipment, making sure staff feel healthy, thinking about who gets to self-isolate. And as we move forward, balancing between the social bubbles and the 6 people that can meet outside, all of which is about to change in the next 5 minutes, hopefully for the better. I've just been really inspired and think it's brilliant. So we may well be able to do something else like this. Keep sending stuff in. And in the meantime, I hope you find the document, the Play After Lockdown document, helpful just in terms of the basics. And we'll send out a whole raft of risk assessments and any other information that our speakers can send us to you all.